All right, hello and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I am John Filipek, the Sales Director on the Federal Space here at SHI International Corp. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Ben Joseph, the Chief Data Officer at the United States Postal Service, Office of the Inspector General. Ben, how are you doing today?
Good, John. Good to be here and talking to you all about something that's very near and dear to me, data management, analytics, you name anything data, that's something that gets me riled up.
Yeah, and I've had the pleasure of doing a couple of these now for the CDO magazine, and I'm always very interested to hear the different perspective of the chief data officers and kind of how they answer some of these questions that certainly overlap, but then how they specifically apply to the different organizations. So we had the benefit of speaking with somebody over at the Space Force and then another individual at the Coast Guard, and I'm very interested to hear how you guys over there are using data, right, essentially to solve the problems, because I do feel as though the world as a whole is moving in that direction, right? Being able to look at big data, organize it, classify it so that then we can be deadly with it, right? And I think that's usually something that scares people, but in reality, right, if we're being, put into buckets specifically based on our profiles, right, they're there for a reason. That's how we're profiled, right, based on our own data.
Yep, that is correct.
Awesome. So I'll jump right in here. Again, we have a couple of prepared questions for you, and then of course, anything that you additionally would like to cover, by all means, right? I'm sure the audience would love to hear. So on my end, right, the first thing I always like to bat across here to the interviewees is what projects has the USPS OIG tackled recently with the help of analytics and or automation, right? How have you guys been using this in real time to date, or are you still looking to put some of the parameters in place so that you can now execute with some of the things that you hope to leverage the data for?
Thanks, John. So just before I go into some of the specifics, right, I do want to level set ourselves with what USPS OIG does and how we deal with data, right, and what value is it adding. So USPS OIG, it is an oversight agency, as you all know, and our primary charge is to provide oversight in the postal domain, or the agency that we oversee is United States Postal Service. So I'm not sure if you all know the extent of Postal Service, but this is one of the agencies within the government or even within the entire US that touches every household 6 days a week. Okay, pretty much every household. If somebody is receiving a mail, you will see a mailman come. There is a mail that is delivered, and there is millions and millions and millions of pieces of mail that goes through the entire stream. So all we realize is that you put mail through one end, and then somehow magically it shows up in another end. But there is a lot that happens in the middle.
Sure.
And so Postal, as usual, I mean, that is an innovative agency, and anytime you use technology, it produces data. Okay, and obviously, we being an oversight agency, for us, how do we provide oversight? And our mission is almost like we got to try and identify how we make sure that there is no fraud, there is no wastage, and people don't really abuse the system. So that's our primary charge. And our mission is always about increasing efficiency. We want to ensure that there is enough accountability, and we also want to make sure that the integrity of the postal system is maintained. Okay, that's our primary charge. Now, how do you do that? This is where a lot of those technology investments that Postal has made and the data that produces that comes to use for us. So we literally, live and breathe on their data. So we had to bring that data. We had to make sure that that is organized. And then within our organization, we have like two classes of users, right? Primarily, it is the auditors who really look for any accountability issues, efficiency issues, and then things that are done wrongly, right? Like things, people who do like nefarious things within that space. So this is where investigations come in. You have our special agents who really use this data to kind of see, okay, did the check that came in yesterday, did somebody left it? Did the package that came through, which had something nefarious in it, did somebody do something with it? So all of that goes into an investigative wing, and how we do that is with the data. So we got to make sure that the data that is brought in, it is clearly organized, it is stored, it is made analysis ready, and then we kind of vend it to the folks. So I'll probably not go too much into the program spaces, but the things that we really cover is things like contracting fraud, and mail theft is a big area that we kind of focus on. And then, we also make sure that facilities are maintained and they are kind of, it's efficiently run and all that from an operations perspective. So these are some of the areas where we focus on, and we build a lot of products around those analytic products. and we use the data, we use modern tools. So, I mean, after I came in the past year and a half, I mean, we have modernized the stack, and that is something that started a little earlier. So there is a data modernization stack effort that has been going on, and we are still working on it. It's like I said, it's not like okay, we start here and it is done here, right? It's always like a journey. Here to start, we have started, and that journey is evolving day by day, and we are making good progress there.
Yeah, I feel like once you can kind of get it stood up, right? The goal is to continue to become mature in how you leverage,
Exactly.
the data. So I love to hear that, and for you to look at it as a journey, right? Because it very much so is that, and I feel more than anything, right? Like just like a GPS in your phone, you might have the one route that is supposedly the best right off the bat, but that's before an overturned tractor trailer on I-95, at least where I am here in Jersey, right? And then all of a sudden you get diverted to all these other routes. And I think being able to be fluid with some of the ways that you use the data is very important. But with that, there are, of course, certain principles that I think come along with having to be mainstays, right? Or pillars that you would build around. So on your end, when you were kind of, going through the process of, again, putting together how you're going to be using the data, what was one of the first things that you kind of set up on your end? So in the past, CDOs have mentioned like validating the cleanliness of the data, right? Because you can have a bunch of it, but if it's not clean and if it's then not put into the right spot, of course, it's not going to be much use to you later on and when you're hopefully going to leverage it. So on your end, right, what do you feel like the best first step for maybe a brand new CDO or an up and coming CDO or something along those lines? Like what should they first try and tackle within their individual organization?
So one is to make sure that the data is accessible and easily usable. Okay, and I mean also try to define the extent of how much data do we have, and kind of inventory it and catalog it. Those two are like really important because I mean as far as our agency is concerned, I mean we have been using data for quite some time. So if you look at it, I mean, we have had a proliferation of dashboards or reports. I mean, we got probably hundreds of reports, right? So you do not want a similar situation. So we want to make sure that, okay, we have some level of inventory which says, okay, these are this 100 reports or this 20 reports is what is very core. And the data that feeds into it is what we really need to make sure that it is organized, it is clean, it is governed, and it is easily managed, right? So whatever pipeline it goes through from start to finish, that is very well organized. So if you talk about what are some of the important things, that creating that pipeline, creating that sustainable architecture, that is highly important for us, so that like I said earlier, it has to evolve into the next state, right? I mean, so this way, I mean, what happens is we are dealing with spaces where we have lots of unknown challenges. Like our space, I mean, we have a lot of unknown challenges, and we have scale issues because of certain ways that we have been doing things, right? So if you do this correctly, means it just gives you an economy to kind of scale up. Okay, in this day and age, especially since we leverage the cloud and some modern tools like Databricks and others, right? So this just gives us more leeway to kind of go in those directions and to equip our end users with more information and meaningful information. It's not like more information because I can just give them like, okay, here is a salad bar approach. Here's like 20 things, and now go run and consume. That's not going to mean anything. I want to make sure that, I mean, if the person is really looking for a particular subject or an entity, I want to get that to him in the shortest form as possible with less number of clicks. So how do you create that unified experience? That's like another key thing. So something that you probably won't see too often, and this is where I'm wearing a little bit of my earlier architecture hat, right? My technologist hat. One thing you wouldn't see too much in the analytics space is the prevalence of user experience, right? So typically, I mean, the most of this the analytics shop, it's like, okay, I might get a requirement, I might get a use case, I'm going to go out, do my analysis, I'm going to create my little tool, and I'll just punt it over the wall. Nowadays, what we do is, I mean, we actually bring in another thing on top of it, like user experience. Like, how do you want to use the data? What type of information would you like to consume? How easy should we make it for you to consume? Okay, so that user experience piece where the upfront user research, that really helps in creating the unified experience. So that, I mean, Right now, our space is that where the person who's trying to get their job done, they have to jump around probably 5 or 6 different tools. But what we're trying to do is to get it to more of a unified form so that they don't need to jump around in 5 or 6 places. They have a place where they originate the request, and then from there they can kind of triage and see, okay, what all information they need, and they can get to it very easily. And it's also mobile friendly and all that because a lot of our folks, they are on the field, they do stuff on the field, so we want to make sure that mobile experience is also something easily consumable.
I love that. And one of the things that we've noticed, right, is depending on the individual agency, you're going to have to go to different stakeholders in order to kind of get the buy-in in order to start leveraging data just as a main principle, right? Yeah, for the longest time, a lot of people, especially from higher up, right, management positions, pride themselves on being able to make a lot of decisions, right, on a strong gut. And now all of a sudden we're able to kind of put into numbers what that gut feeling could potentially be swayed by and what maybe it should be swayed by, right? And I think it's the same thing, right, that baseball managers are dealing with. How much should you trust what you're seeing with your eyes versus what the numbers tell out over the course of a long period of time, right? And that whole analytics piece of it. So I really think it's a great approach, because one of the things that I feel like you'll be able to overcome pretty quickly, right, is maybe some of the internal stakeholding and holdback, if you have any, because you're starting at the end user. You're allowing, your kind of product to speak for itself out amongst the people who are kind of getting their hands dirty with, the tools that are being leveraged by, your particular organization, which I think is just amazing, right? I think that'll also help kind of right, work for them long term, right? And make sure that,
Yeah.
To your point, something that potentially could take only one click that's now taking 5 clicks, that's going to make their life a lot easier, and hopefully the day-to-day more enjoyable. Well, then you're also solving problems internally for
Absolutely.
proficiencies and efficiencies, which I love. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's not like a one and done, right? I mean, it's also a continuing process where that continuous user testing is very much applicable. So that, I mean, we still kind of bring in that same user group to do another research to figure out, is it really working out well, or is there any efficiencies that we can bring in? And again, the automation piece, right? So how do you kind of integrate more information so that you can create that much more global or global user experience? So that's also something that is very front and center for us.
Well, thank you, Ben, CDO of the USPS OIG, for joining me on today's call. It's been an absolute pleasure. Love to always hear the fresh perspective and the way that data is being used, in the federal government today, especially as somebody, sitting here trying to support you from the technology side. Please, everybody there in the audience, feel free to visit cdomagazine.tech for any additional interviews that you may want to pull down, as content is provided on a daily basis there. So thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me. Bye
Yes,
now.
thank you, Ben. It's been great.